Okay, we did it. We got that far. I am here on Intuitive Public TV with Demi Pietchell of the Starfire Codes. My name is Megan Elizabeth Morris, and we are beginning with the present moment. Whoa. I really love your lights.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
I was going to say before, they make me really happy. They go really well with the new decor that I spontaneously, magically managed to create over the course of preparing to talk with Jacqueline Rendell and now with you. These images are new, so it's neat. It's neat that they all flow together so well. Let's see, I got to turn this off. It looks like YouTube is working. I found out just a moment ago that Twitter will now no longer let us live stream unless we have a premium account there. So I removed it.
Okay.
Not hugely surprising. We've been dealing with a lot of things having to do with social media. You have dealt with a lot of things with social media, and that we have noticed is part of choosing to show up with relational integrity as a media platform with the community body. Sometimes that does not mesh well with the usual way of things in the business world. There are a lot of control methodologies in use there. But what we have experienced in the Intuitive Network as we've gotten to know your platform for all of the things that you've dealt with, just trying to hold real, rational conversations, trying to make sure people aren't getting squashed out of important conversations. There's so much life-affirming, free energy in just doing it and having the courage to do it. And I've been so grateful for what you've been building, because what it did for us was at that time especially unprecedented. And so I want to talk a lot more about that relational integrity of the public media platform with the community, because you demonstrate that in ways most other places we don't find it.
Yeah, a lot of that came from, having worked in social, most of my career that was in digital marketing, after I had gone, out of the production sphere and into social media and digital marketing. And, just even establishing those kinds of areas where people feel, safe to communicate, and they feel like they can, say whatever they need to say. That was always my way of pushing that. So in all of my spaces, anywhere that I was responsible for curating that, I would always, make it a rule that there would be no ad hominem attacks. There would be, only civil discourse. And that carried over. So, once that was happening, and then I saw things start to deteriorate with that, around the beginning of 2020, when people wanted to squash any sort of conversation that was happening that was any different from anything that anyone was, quote unquote, allowed to say.
Yeah.
I actually ended up, shutting down. I had a very old, from the beginning, like when it was starting out from colleges, I had, my very old Facebook account. I ended up nuking the whole thing because I would post pictures of sunrises every day. That's all I was posting after a while. I noticed everyone was fighting. I didn't want to fight with anybody. And I would just put up a sunrise every morning when I would go out to the beach. I would put up a picture of the sunrise, and people would still find a way to fight on top of a sunrise.
This is very interesting to me. And there are certainly, maybe another time we can dive into like some of this algorithm stuff that goes on. There's some weirdness and conflict seeding going on, but in our communities, since long before, where around 2020 there was this uptick for a lot of people in noticing it. But for years before that, and for decades, for some of our community members, people have been trying to call out, hey, I'm being squeezed out of community discourse. We're being really hurt. We just want to be part of a respectful conversation. What's going on? Why are we experience, there's violence going on that may or may not be intentional. There's absolutely criminal violence that's occurring around certain subject intersections, one of them being environmental poisoning. Many of them being environmental poisoning, that being a pretty complex subject. And my introduction to this, unfortunately, coincided more directly with human trafficking network activities in my locations that I had no idea were there. And most of the people that I have known before the Intuitive Network have no idea that they're there. And so we've been trying to find the most stabilizing points we can in a lot of different languages. People speak really, really different languages about it, but how can we bring in what is the most stabilizing set of points for a particular group to be able to start to recognize? Because when we let the most disabled and invisible people get siphoned off out of the community body, we lose the community body. It goes away. And so the people who are left in the visible mainstream, or whatever you want to call it, they go, but this thing's not working, and I can't seem to jobs don't work, and income doesn't work, and the structures don't work, and what's going on? Everything's broken. It's because we're allowing our community bodies to be invisibly siphoned away, and we haven't developed good skills for dialoguing to repair that. And what we found when we started engaging with your platform, we found you were using a lot of what we call intuitive tool sets to make sure that there are real communications occurring in the community body. And we've used a lot of your data points to help us bridge with other communities. Another thing I'm really grateful for.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And it's, it's great to, have this, this opportunity to be able to discuss that and to let other people know exactly, what we were doing and what we were faced with that. But it mainly stemmed from, having a background and understanding in, in noticing when certain people were having trouble talking. They were having trouble with the discourse and in saying what they needed to say, and it would come out in different ways that that not everyone could understand, and then just be there and ask the questions and kind of lead that that discourse. And also, if anyone would not understand that and start to attack because it's different, to hold space for that and make sure that that's not what's occurring within my space. And I put a high premium on that in all of my spaces, really. I don't allow that. So so that became the main thing, but it's also, to feel the energy off of somebody else and to know, that they have that sort of an issue getting their point across, or, they might feel more comfortable in audio than in text, or, the fact that text a lot of the time can be misunderstood. So all of that adds to it too. So adds to like the lack of understanding that can happen.
I'm going to put a link here also. Let me make sure that I have it correct. Actually, let me make sure that I have that correct. I want to put a link to your Telegram channel.
Oh, yeah.
Because, whoops, hold on. Actually, I'm messing it up. Can you say it out loud, because my brain's doing something strange?
Yeah, it's Starfire Codes chat. So here, let me type it back to you where you were.
Oh, got it. There we go. Sometimes my brain just can't see. Well, I mean, a lot of the time my brain just can't see what's right in front of my face. There it is. Wow.
It's right there.
Here we go. Whoops.
There it is.
My brain is working. So this is the Telegram chat that we found. And I mean, I want to also emphasize for everybody viewing that we speak and bridge a huge number of completely different languages when we're talking about these things in the Intuitive Network. And so here is a set of those languages that Demi has been co-facilitating in her communities. And for some of our community members, they're going to be like, what? Well, I don't know what to do with that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's another different kind of language that people are speaking out there. And when we are in these positions of severe disablement, where one of the things that gets especially damaged is verbal neurology. Any kind of trauma you experience is going to damage verbal neurology in some way. People end up really having many different ways of communicating about what's going on for them. And many of them have never met one another. And there's a lot of conflict seeding going on to make people scared of one another. So that they can't necessarily figure out how to bridge something. They have this threat response. And so in the intuitive network, we're doing a lot to bridge those threat responses, because if we don't, more and more people die. Our colleagues die if we don't do that. I would not be here if we had not been. And so to be able to notice what different communities are doing, especially when they're doing it in such a powerful way as you are, where you're really holding this strong, stabilizing container for people to have an opportunity to go, well, I don't understand what this is, but if I attune myself to respectful discourse, there are people here who will talk with me about it. They might not be easy conversations, and we might have to learn one another's languages, and it can take time to do that. But for me and many others, to encounter the Starfire codes where you are holding that strong, stabilizing container, that's life-saving. That built back my neurological function in amazing ways that I need people to know about.
Absolutely. And just to have that kind of a space where people know that other people are coming in here who, whether it was because of disability or because of PTSD from not being able to speak their own minds, which is what came later, because so many people were being forced out of spaces who were not disabled or trafficked or anything of the sort. They had the same thing happening, like as time went on. So there's this, for different reasons, this collective PTSD that we're all navigating surrounding, just having a discourse at all, because so many people will squash anything that you want to say if it goes against the grain of anything that that is the mainstream well accepted way of looking at something. Or even, in certain communities, talking outside of their narrative and bringing up other points will create friction and chaos among them. And what people don't understand about these algorithms, because they think of them as so impersonal, people are programming those. It's just a set of rules. An algorithm is just a set of rules. People are programming those spaces to do those things. So, when you've got someone who's sitting in front of their computer and they are, tending toward a certain type of content, they might have another type of content put in front of them in order to give them nervous dysregulation, in order to spark that intentionally so that they will feel triggered and off-put and unable to relate to the other people in the content that they're seeing. So it stokes fights, it stokes adrenaline rushes and cortisol spikes and things like this, that, if you're controlling what you see, you're not going to have that as much. And, you can determine whether or not you want to go into a space like that. But in most of the mainstream spaces, it's being stoked to cause that kind of animosity because they want people fighting with each other. It keeps people from noticing what else is going on.
It sells a lot of, let's just say, product.
Yeah. Yes.
For people to be caught in conflict they don't know how to get out of. And one of the things that I want to say too, because thank you for mentioning, this has been happening to a lot of people who do not think of themselves as disabled or invisible necessarily. People who have not necessarily thought of themselves as being trafficked or ever had an experience that would ever be described as trafficking in their understanding of things. We have really broadened the way we use the words human trafficking, because there is this mass commoditization going on, even for the most able-bodied and privileged people.
Yeah.
There's stuff going on, and that stuff is keeping in place the most extreme, most violent, most direct forms of human trafficking. And we have to be able to recognize that. But one of the things that I want to mention from what you said before is that people who don't have that experience of their disablement in their lives, we watch them being drawn down into this terrible kind of hardship gradually, and people don't necessarily see it coming. But we know that if they get to a certain threshold, they won't be able to communicate anymore. No. They won't be able to work a job. They won't be able to interact in basic ways. They might be trapped in their house, and people don't see that coming. They don't realize how fast that can happen. Yes. And then you're part of this extreme level commodity that's being extracted from, where maybe you're being labor trafficked, or maybe you're being sex trafficked, or a variety of other things can be happening. And, you know, it takes people years to even get enough footing to start talking. I mean, the worst things that, some of the worst things that happened for me in 2015, 2016. And, you know, we've had little flows of function. We've somehow managed, like we live streamed a bit like around 2020, and then we couldn't anymore. And now we're doing this at a level that's starting to connect a lot better with more audiences, but it has taken most of a decade to do that. So we need people to know, let's get ahead of this. Let's collaborate with one another now. Let's be caring towards one another and respectful towards one another now, and not let this deteriorate as if it's just no thing. Because a lot of people do treat it like it's just no thing.
And also, could you please explain to people, because I know I've dealt with this with the people that I was around, and most people don't get this, how difficult it is even to perform the usual tasks that most people take for granted. Anything that's digital, anything that's where you hit these roadblocks because you know, your name will flag something, or you won't be able to have a certain conversation because something's happening. You won't be able to sign up for a credit card, or it takes, you know, like you have to keep calling back to reestablish the same credit card. You keep hitting these blocks that the rest of people aren't subject to. So they think that it's wrong. They think you can't do it. They think that you're lying about it sometimes.
Right. So there are two parts of this I want to call out. One of them is, when we started daring to say on Facebook, and I mean other places too, but wow, Facebook, when we started daring to say that there was sex trafficking going on, we found all of a sudden our posts weren't really going anywhere. People weren't seeing them anymore. And we're like, it's just like inappropriate to do. Are we being rude? Wait, this doesn't make any sense. What's going on? There's a lot of really active sexual content on Facebook.
Yes.
That everybody sees. So it's like, okay, it's not sex exactly. But why is it that sex trafficking is the thing that if we bring that up, all of a sudden we can't seem to reach anybody? That was really, it's still really jarring.
It's telling. Yeah. And it's telling where the relationships lie with that. And it's also, it's twofold in that sense, because they have relationships with law enforcement and relationships with the companies and the people on the other side that are doing all of this. So there's also a relationship to keep it going, because people are getting apprehended in that way. So there's a relationship there to keep it going, because you don't know who's undercover looking into somebody who's doing all of this, and to call it out would break everything that they're doing on one side. And then on the other side, they're propping it up. So you never know, you know, because they're in the middle of that and sort of playing both sides.
Yeah, it's a business.
Yes.
Balancing, but it's not balancing. It's unbalancing to the entire collective body. I thank you for mentioning Facebook's relationship with police, for instance, because one of the things that we've had to contend with is that our community members would be trying to reach out for help when they are feeling really, they're experiencing really extreme situations. Many people experience suicidality. It's very common. And one of the things that we found out was going on is that people would send private Facebook messages to one another talking about their suicidal ideation, trying to make contact with someone who cares about them. And there's at least one instance where the police were sent to that person's house and they didn't mention it anywhere else.
Whoa.
Private Facebook Messenger. And one thing that I want to direct people to, because there's this whole thing about suicide helplines actually jumping the gun. I'm not trying to make a pun, but that's what came out of my mouth. I'm just sitting with that for a moment. Suicide helplines sending police to people's houses without actually establishing what was going on. So people reach out, they're really suffering. And then I'm going to put Rob Wypon's interview here in the comments, at least on YouTube. They're showing up in the comments. I'll put it. Will that show up? Oh yeah, it looks like that will show up. But with suicide helplines, yes, but also with social media platforms where they're sort of the idea is that they want people to be safe, but they're mechanizing a distorted idea of safety by having these automatic processes that put people in danger. I was nearly killed because people were sending wellness checks to my house when I was in the midst of trafficking influences. And I was looking for help. I was trying to find help. But every time somebody would randomly send the police to my house, supposedly to check up on me, supposedly to connect me with care of some kind, it would put me in more danger because no one was really listening to anything that I was saying. It was this automatic process people had to offload responsibility onto the systemic structure. And people do that with the wellness checks. People do that with social media platforms tremendously. And, they don't realize what the effects of these mechanized systems are. And the other thing I want to bring up with the using the word sex trafficking on Facebook thing, your question originally, there's also this whole set of layers about how many people who are severely disabled or on their way to being severely disabled have extreme levels of sensitivity to EMF emissions. And radiation exposure, which is what these devices we're using are. All the antennas is radiation exposure. And so it becomes difficult to impossible to communicate, to go through basic processes, like you said, like signing up for a debit card or a credit card, interacting with any kind of bank account, being able to communicate with any of these services or public entities that you're supposed to be able to reach out to. You can't make phone calls, you can't send emails. I do these broadcasts now, and I cannot really much see what's happening. I have trained myself to copy and paste stuff so that people look at me doing this and they think that I'm functional. And I'm functional in certain ways, but I can't do a lot of the things that people just assume would come along with this. I've gotten really good at being a trained monkey in certain ways. And so I'm managing this, but me being able to do this is primarily because I had a tremendous set of privileges growing up in terms of my education and media training and public performance and stage performance and creative projects and marketing and communications. I did a lot of things that just happened to fit together to make it possible for me to do this when my body's breaking down as much as it is. And we've found this to be so crucial, this activation of the collective media body so that we can reach one another, so we know who is here in our communities, who's trying to talk to us what is actually going on. We don't want to wipe out the worst of the reports about what's going on. We would like to know what they are. We
Yeah.
do something about them.
Yeah, and to have some sort of relationship with and say in what's going on in the public discourse. And it becomes difficult because your experiences and what you've done to bring those experiences to light run counter to a lot of these agendas that are going through, and you're getting blocked off, and people don't realize that because they're not having those same experiences. So you go to tell them that you're having the same experience that these other people are having, but they're not having it. So they're thinking of you as paranoid, or they're not listening. And then especially in the case where you're talking about suicide hotlines and things like this, yeah, it's the point. If someone is feeling that way, they're not feeling heard. They're not feeling listened to already. So whether that's, a problem, in a larger sense or not, it goes against anything that somebody like that would need in that kind of a scenario, is just to be heard and listened to, and to really feel through what that person has going on in the moment, so that you can empathize, sympathize, develop a connection, and be able to help that person build themselves back up, match their frequency and build their frequency back up, to get them to a point where they're not feeling that way anymore. That's important.
To a point where they can feel a sense of interconnectivity and belonging as part of the community body. And not just, have whatever they're capable of doing, whatever they're capable of communicating, kind of used as fuel for the community, but they're not seen in the community. One of the things that you did early on that was so meaningful to us is that we brought some of the Intuitive Public Radio posts over to the Starfire Codes chat on Telegram. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was early in the process of us, like, tentatively, gradually, like, okay, it seems like we could interact here. Like, maybe it could be okay. I couldn't see what I was doing. I could barely retain any of my interactions. It was excruciatingly difficult. We're like, okay, let's just try to connect and just like be cool, because we'd been run out of spaces for being rude, talking about sex trafficking. Really, really bizarre stuff. And one of the things you said somewhat early on was yes, like, if people want to coordinate to create solutions with one another, like, you can do this here in this chat. Like, you created a welcoming vibration for us to say, hey, there are these serious situations going on. Can we find people here who also want to implement solutions? Yeah. And you gave us a resounding yes, and you have demonstrated your resounding yes so many times since then. And that there's something, when we think, like, what's allowed you to do that, we know that you have gathered a lot of resource points that have let you see what this was. You've been able to see something of what we're experiencing, like, from the beginning of us describing it to you. But I wonder if you have thoughts about that. There's a sort of courage that's necessary to say to people, yes, implement solutions in this space, collaborate with one another in this space. A lot of communities don't do that, and it seems like they're fearful of it.
Maybe that's just something to do with me. I tend not to have fear like that. And if I'm being goaded into that sort of paradigm where, you're supposed to feel fear from, I'll probably do it harder anyway. So, I mean, like, that's just a personality thing. Maybe I'm not going to be told what to say or how to think or how to act or what to do. I will not be told that. And if I see that somebody needs something and I see that that's valid and I see that I can provide that, sure, do that here. The one problem that I faced with that, and that you and I faced together, was when somebody comes in and they say, hey, I'm having this issue, we don't know whether that's real or not. We don't know who they are. We don't know how to direct them somewhere that, without, showing them where everyone else is. that's
Right.
difficult. So how do you vet that? How do you have those conversations where you figure out, building those trust points and figuring out that they're able to, become a part of that group, and that they're not, or that they're not so troubled that they're going to set everyone else off, that they need some space there too, to kind of, come into their own first before they're engaging. Because that can happen too. If people have a lot of nervous dysregulation before they even enter into the space, they can set off everyone else's nervous dysregulation and set things back.
And they're speaking a particular language that other people may experience as inherently traumatizing because of the conflict seeding that's going on. Yeah. So one of the things that we do is we proceed really gradually in a lot of different intuitive network spaces, most of them on Telegram, so that we're creating threads of gradual dialogue with anybody who comes into contact with us, and we're doing our best to introduce them gradually to different spaces. So we have a massive number of public and private Telegram spaces, because people surviving traumas like these really do need smaller groups and individual conversations before they are suddenly in a larger community environment. And in situations where people have been in the Starfire Codes chat, the community chat, where like it's really like it's a serious thing, saying, you're experiencing some kind of really violent criminal targeting. Here are all the other people we know of experiencing really violent.
Yeah, how do you do that?
And that's not really something that people can do. So we need, and I mean, you're doing this so much too, like in different but overlapping ways that we're doing it in the intuitive network, creating these really life-affirming, love-oriented, warriorship-oriented public media entry points, so that people can feel stabilized as they get to know the deeper parts of that community resource, and interact where they feel most comfortable interacting, and not suddenly be thrown into contact with people who have like diametrically opposed traumas, which is all, I mean, that's all the conflict we're experiencing in the world right now, is people with diametrically opposed traumas or disability needs, where they don't have any support to help them with that. There's nobody helping with the bridging of the languaging. You two have participated so immediately. Like, I mean, as soon as I started messaging in there, you were already reflecting back to me in ways that were building that language bridge with me. And that people need to understand, especially leaders of communities and leaders of public media platforms, need to understand how powerful that is. If you have any reliable group in your community, in any community, helping to serve that need, you are you're evaporating conflict that would otherwise be occurring. You're evaporating potential trauma, and most communities just don't know how to do that. So we're like, okay, well, let's make public media all the time teaching people how to do that, even if we need to broadcast while dying in the bathtub, which I have done quite a lot. Unfortunately, fortunately, not recently. I am not interested in broadcasting dying from the bathtub anymore. No more of that. Thank you very much. But they're out there. It's still out there in our public media for a reason, because people in these situations have had to do that.
If you're leading one of these spaces, just, talking to the other people who run channels out there who are, would be interested in, holding space for anything like this that's going on, be the one to jump in, be the one to set the example, to set the pace for what those interactions should look like. Because if you allow your people who don't necessarily know about any of that, because they all come from different backgrounds and different places and have varying degrees of experience with any of that, if they are, you might luck out and somebody jumps in who knows something about something. But if you don't luck out, you could end up, with somebody who runs away from the group because they don't feel supported in that way. So if you're setting the example for that kind of an interaction where you are, you're welcoming, you're holding space, you're asking questions, you are, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on there, but also, being welcoming to, other people who want to have those conversations within that space, making it known 100% on top of everything that you're saying. And you have to be upfront about it too, especially because it's hard for a lot of people to even converse in that way or to know what's going on, and because of the differences in language.
Yeah, and it can take practice to really feel like you can steady yourself in it. And I mean, all we can do is keep practicing kindness, patience, forbearance. Like if we feel a sudden tension, like maybe take a step back and say, like, is there something going on in here that I need to attend to before I
need dysregulation? Yeah.
But for every person, community leaders, public media leaders, and every person in every community, like we were talking about with Jacqueline Rendell, to just show up like with a belief in one another and a gentleness for one another and care for one another in the most basic ways.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a big thing, but little increments of it really add up and really prevent the kinds of super traumatic conflicts that a lot of people have. I mean, it's come to be, I hate to say it, normalized. It's been normalized.
People expect it. People expect to have those kinds of conflicts, even jumping into any space. It doesn't necessarily have to be about that. It doesn't have to be about anything that we're even talking about here. People will walk into a space automatically thinking that they're going to be attacked for whatever it is that they're saying, just because that's the reality of our landscape now. That's our culture now. And this, we've pendulum swung from a sort of live and let live, where we can actually have these kinds of discussions and civil discourse without any of that. But now people have, I see that with Jacqueline saying, "Hey, let's be kind, eh?" That's great. So yeah, like just to, be able to have these sorts of discussions without, on one side or the other, feeling triggered, right? So people who were censored and gaslit and all of these things, regardless of the reason why, they're coming into a new space automatically expecting that that's going to be the case. I even see people coming over to Substack thinking that they're already shadow banned, thinking that these things are already happening to them when it's not necessarily the case. And they're probably just having a glitch on the app or whatever it is. Sure. They're not giving the benefit of the doubt. They're saying, oh my God, this is happening to me, what's happening here, instead of just, adding them and seeing, what the problem is or whatever. Like maybe there's some overall issue that they're tending to or whatever, like ask the question, because they wouldn't have you on that space and allow you to be communicating there. Like if they didn't want you there, they want you there. They're welcoming to you. So, but it's that knee-jerk reaction from having been on Facebook, having been on Twitter, having been, in these other spaces where you have to watch your keywords and you have to watch what you're saying. And certain people are good with that and certain people aren't. I find myself, just flipping into an entirely different vocabulary. If I know, I have a PTSD based vocabulary for not setting off algorithms.
I hear you. That feels like.
I have all of that. I personally have all of that, and I haven't gone through any of this, but I have that that sort of, I guess it's a way of adapting, a way of coping with that scenario. Where, like in some cases, in some interactions, I will feel that kind of knee-jerk response, like, oh, this person's going to, is going to hassle me for thinking for myself.
Yeah. And we all need to consolidate, to gather together resources that help us regulate our nervous systems, that help us stabilize our energy patterns in whatever ways that we can do that, so that when a challenge comes up, we can meet it very steadily. We can be really present with what's happening. We can be our best selves, and it can be really tricky and it can really be difficult. But you keep practicing, and we say intuitive tool sets over and over and over, because we're always collaboratively developing what are the tool sets, whether we're talking about, like developing a particular skill or an interpersonal dialogue kind of pattern, or applications on the internet or in software, anything that we can build together, any kind of tool set that helps us move through this in a more life-affirming way, more connective with one another, collaborating with greater fluency with one another. It makes a huge difference even when you've just started practicing it. You're just going increment by increment and you're like, there's something to this. This really makes a difference. So let's keep doing it, and let's talk more about it, and let's celebrate more about it so more people can learn how to do it. One of the things that you have called out a number of times, for instance, in the Starfire Codes podcast, where you were doing the videos, which I think are on Substack. I think they're uploaded to Substack directly, and they're also audio only versions. Some of the conversations in there that I particularly appreciated, and I'm having trouble remembering exactly where they were, but it made an impression on me that you were talking about it. Any of us speaking with one another, until we've anchored more in relationship with one another, we don't know what one another's words mean ever. Words mean completely different things to different people. And it can be so unexpected, and it can be radically divergent from what you think is going on. And so we have to really like pause and move slowly and go, is it possible that they meant something by those words that I have not understood at all? And in addition to that, there are levels of invisible disablement everywhere. People with privilege, people with media platforms, people who are leaders of communities, people who have huge resources, people who have lots and lots of money, everybody all over the spectrum has some sort of hidden form of disablement they may never be talking about, often because it's not safe for them to talk about it. So we never know why one another can or cannot do a particular thing, or has said or not said a particular thing.
Yeah.
Find out in relationship with one another, it's the only way.
Yeah. And it becomes hard because you don't know when you can say something. And it's very difficult, especially again in recent years, to build trust, because that trust has been eroded, and it was eroded in a lot of cases intentionally by destroying people's support systems. Yes. By actively destroying people's support systems, by making it so that if you had a thought in your head that was separate from the thoughts everyone else had, that you would no longer be accepted, that you would be vilified, and that you would be tossed out of your in-groups. You would be ridiculed or ostracized. And that's, those are the ways that people were, kept in line for thousands of years. It's just a new way of doing the same thing. So, where people had these, vast support systems before, they've fallen apart, and over what, right? So now we have to look at it like, how precarious are our support systems when, one word from this newscaster, one word from this media outlet can cause destruction of a family, destruction of an entire family.
That one little thing. And so many people living at extreme intersections of compounding and compounding and compounding and compounding, not just one little thing, but I mean, countless little things. When you think of the power of that one thing,
those things, and building up over time and drops in a bucket, and then eventually everything breaks apart. Mm-hmm. And what recourse do you have to put it back together? You don't, because you might be surrounded by people who don't even think that way, people who don't see it, people who don't see it coming. So then you're in this scenario where where you're the only one. And then you're left out of that. And then you are in a position where, because you didn't go along with everyone else, you have had to, from the ground up, completely reinstitute your support systems, working with everyone else, your work, your friendships, your family in some cases. Some people have had their entire families break apart because of this.
And killed.
Yes. Yeah.
And in situations where, say that part again. I
said in the worst case scenario. Yes. Yeah. That's happened as well.
We have many people all across the network. The vast majority of the people who have begun the network are so severely disabled at these intersections that many of them right now don't have any idea how they can have family, how they can have any kind of economic participation, any kind of job that they could do and be paid for, any way to live, any way to have a roof over their head. Many people living in their cars, many people who don't have a car to live in, and excruciating situations that in typical environments have been sort of this vague, like, oh, we feel really badly about these vague people over here, but we don't talk to them because of what they might say. So we've had to really turn that on its head to be able to even start solving any of these problems. And when we started to be involved at the Starfire codes, it was really clear that people who had really serious experiences were speaking about it forthrightly, knowing that it was okay for them to say what they needed to say, not to be cruel, not to be disrespectful, not to pound anybody, but to say, this is what I'm experiencing, this is how I need to express it. If we're in a place where we can actually dialogue about it and discover what one another has been experiencing.
Because if you're even just holding space for yourself to be able to speak, you need to be able to trust that the people around you are going to go to bat for you if somebody comes at you. And that's the bottom line there. You need to be able to trust the other people in that space to not allow it, to speak up for you when you can't speak up for yourself. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Anyone in that space knows that I will not tolerate that. The admins will not tolerate that. No one will. No one will. And, it's one of the unspoken rules of the space. I will not tolerate any kind of, bullying or gaslighting or anything like that. I'm not going to put up with it. We need to have spaces where we have civil discourse. And
unspoken and spoken and unspoken.
Yes. Yeah. And it needs to be understood.
Yeah, it does need to be understood. And you're repeating it that you have in my memory, part of what allowed my functions stabilize enough to invite more people to the space, for me to dialogue more in the space, to talk more about, okay, we are building this community where pretty much almost all communities, all communities like yours, like with the basic traits that your community has, other communities with those set of structures had not tolerated our presence or had not responded to us in any way. Like, it was very uncomfortable, it was very scary, or it was very life-threatening. And so when you repeated that, like, my body's ability to communicate, to do anything, it frees up. Like, suddenly you have some strength to do something or say something or interact. And like, it's difficult for me to describe how severe my physical circumstances were then. Like, I'm doing a lot of describing what they're like now, and they were much worse then. Like, according to a lot of spaces, like, I'm not even a person if I'm experiencing those things. Like sort of, there's this kind of an object in a lot of ways, but there are people in there. I was in there striving to communicate. And when you repeated that you're not gonna allow people to just attack one another. We're gonna have respectful discourse in here. I'm like, okay, she gets it. Okay. And I'm reminding myself, because like, then I would forget, and then you'd say it again, and then I'd remember. I'm like, oh, I'm reminding myself. Okay, she gets it. She gets it. I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna bring something else here, because I couldn't remember any of the interactions I was having. I couldn't. People who haven't experienced that don't know what that's like. But you remember the continuity of the things you've done over the past minute, the past few hours, or the past few days, or the past few weeks, or the past few months. It's difficult to imagine what it's like to not have that continuity. So I appreciated you repeating that. It made your community accessible to severely disabled people in a way that we haven't seen most places at all.
I never know who's in there, right? I don't know who's heard it before or who hasn't, and a lot of the same people are in there often, but it's not always the same people, and they could be, showing up once a month, and who knows if they've ever heard that before.
Well,
So, so they need to hear it again, or for the first time, again for me. But yeah, just even setting those, restrictions, expectations, constraints, whatever you want to call it, but just to make sure that people understand, yeah, everyone can talk about anything that they want to talk about in here, and that's okay. And yeah, there are not a lot of other spaces where you can do that. You'll get kicked right out for it.
Yeah. One of the things I'd like to ask you, and let's just be, I'm cool right now. We've been talking for about almost an hour. And this gives me so much energy and function to have these most crucial conversations. But let's sort of notice, like if you're feeling like, okay, maybe we're approaching an endpoint, and I'll say maybe we're approaching an endpoint. This thing that I really want to ask you about all of these things we've talked about in the past hour is your professional media experience, your media education.
Mm-hmm.
So, like it was really pretty clear in the beginning that you had a lot of media chops. And then I learned more, and you went to school for it, and you've been in a lot of different environments doing that work or for your education. And I'm very interested in all the things that we've talked about thus far, what that has been for you from those environments that are, it seems like quite a diversity of environments that maybe have different ways of navigating those things, or I mean, I don't know how much friction you've experienced in any of those environments, and I'd love to kind of open up reflectivity about that if you have thoughts about it.
Sure. Well, for anyone who doesn't know my background, I went to film school at NYU. I went back to NYU into the ITP, the Interactive Telecommunications Program. When I started out in my career, I was producing all kinds of different media, commercials, golf shows, you name it. I was producing it. So I came up from there. I ended up working in publicity, in startups. I ended up branching off into content creation for digital marketing. I ended up in podcasting. So I did a little bit of everything as I went along. Anything that would interest me, if that particular project was of interest to me, I would move forward with it. So yeah, a lot of different industries, because a lot of different industries will require that set of skills, even though it doesn't necessarily mesh up with what I studied. I have to learn an entire different industry and then apply my skill set to that industry. So just as you were saying, it's happened over and over and over again. And yeah, different industries have different characteristics and personalities and things like that, and different ways of navigating them, and navigating the people, the space, all of those aspects. Yeah. So, pulling from each of those things, and just allowing that to compound. And then over time, learning about media in such a way that, I learned all of the rules so that I would be able to break them. I learned how to break them eventually, how to break them effectively, how to break media open so that people could see how it worked, so that people could see how it was manipulative, what it was doing, how it's functioning within your head and your mind, and taking the thoughts that you think and altering them. I was studying that, and I was able to crack it open and show people. And, that was really a shifting point for me with that. Up until that point, I was just, like, this is how you craft a story. This is the grammar of film. This is how you understand what's going on. This is how you help other people to understand what you mean. If you follow these principles, if you follow these patterns, people get it. And then you realize those patterns are being used to affect people. So how do I show people that those patterns are affecting them? How do I crack those patterns open and show them, break it open? Like, here's the meat and potatoes behind that. Here's all the gears and how it works.
Right.
And still a lot of people, even though they're absolutely immersed in media from, at this point, the day that they're born, absolutely immersed in it. What family, often doesn't have a television set? It's few and far between. What family doesn't have it running in the background constantly?
Yeah, or on the devices that, I mean, there are programs that get
now,
devices in people's hands when they have nothing else, because it benefits the organizations, the structures that are then able to track people using the device or sell to people using the device. So people are watching, people are immersed in media, whether or not they have a television, whether or not they even have reliable electricity.
At this point. Yeah. So just even going through time and seeing the way that shifted, and that it became more and more and more, and then eventually it was in your pocket. Before we had smartphones, when I was in my master's, everyone was designing a smartphone without knowing it. They're like, every single project would be, well, I want one device that does X, Y, and Z. Every single person would say that. I want one device that does X, Y, and Z. I don't want to have to carry around all of these gadgets. I want one thing in my pocket. And they kept saying it. And they weren't, it's not like they were talking to each other about it. It's just, that was the desire. That was the need. That's why it propelled so much. That's why the second that was in everyone's pockets, they were addicted. Everyone wanted it anyway. It served a need. It served a function. Now it's about how you use it, and what protections you have in place with it. And whether you're educated about that or not, or whether it's, just taking your data and going somewhere else with it, whether the phone is trafficking you, basically. So, you get into.
Those are good words. Whether the phone is really important words for us all to dwell upon.
Yeah. Yeah, because at this point, it's your interface with the phone. As Elon Musk would say, it turns you into a cyborg. So you're connected to the phone, like the phone is part of you, and you feel like you have a limb missing when you leave the phone at the house.
Yes, and it's especially important considering that, because one of the ways that people are being increasingly disabled is that they don't realize, for instance, that interacting with the devices is radiation exposure that you might find out later you're really sensitive to. And people get increasingly disabled at the same time as they are increasingly sold to and marketed to. So that we have many, many people with severe disablement circumstances who are utterly reliant upon devices that are actually still hurting them.
Yes.
So it's a disability aid, but it's more like a disablement. It's an aid that's seeming to help you, but instead it's increasingly disabling you. And they're trapped.
And they don't learn how to mitigate that either. So, and there's not a lot of information unless you're seeking it out, unless you already know that that's going on. There's a barrier to entry to even finding that information, because you have to know it exists to look for it, or someone has to bring it to your attention. There's a definite barrier to entry. So, and that's always been the case with anything with the internet. You have to know what you're looking for to find it.
Right.
So that's always the barrier to entry. So whether somebody has said it to you, whether you've conceived of that yourself, whether you've conceived of the fact that there might be a need, whether you are looking for ways to mitigate that, or whether you even know that it's causing harm, period. How do you figure that out? How do you get to that point? And then how do you seek out measures to take that are going to help you to, expel that energy, or fix up your room so that you're sleeping without being within that energy, so you can get some downtime to it? How do you know that you're supposed to ground? How do you know that you're supposed to earth? How do you know that, you can use silver threaded clothing to protect yourself? Do you know what a blue shield is? Like all this kind of stuff, and until you're like in the midst of doing all of that research, because you realize like, okay, my set of circumstances requires that I use these devices. How do I mitigate that as much as humanly possible so that I don't get hurt? And not everyone is thinking that way. A very small percentage of people are thinking that way, especially because they don't want anybody to know that they're getting hurt by it, because then they would stop using it.
Yeah. I wonder if you would be all right with sharing some of your experiences where you've had to recover your health and stability, where we've talked before about these intersections of environmental illness or toxic injury or radiation exposure. Oh. And I know that you have intersections of those, and I don't know a lot about them, but I know that our communities would be really interested to know what you've endeavored through.
Oh, so real easy, like just from the get of like, figuring out what's happening to you, right? The only times I've ever been sick is when I've had 2 or more consecutive flights in a row. It's not because I'm catching something. It's because I'm up in the air and then down and then up in the air again too fast without discharging the electrons from it. Sore throat immediately. Boom, sore throat. The same sore throat. So whether or not it's not a different illness that's happening to me, it's the same illness that's happening to me if I have 2 or more consecutive flights in too short of an amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
If I have one flight, I land, I discharge the energy, I take enough time and space in between until the next flight, then I'm okay.
Yeah.
Then sickness never happens. Also having a portable Blue Shield helps with that. I have a Blue Shield cube that I keep in the house that entrains and keeps some of that from affecting you. So you leave it in the house and it balances out the environment. But then also
like harmonize the EMF exposure, sort of.
Yeah, and then you have a portable that you carry around with you when you go out that's still entrained to the major unit.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go out, it's not affecting you as much. It'll still affect you, and depending upon where you go, if it's a strong enough signal, sure. And then like having considerations like you want all of your devices off at night. Don't sleep in the same room with all of this stuff. Try not to use as much Bluetooth, and especially not connected to your head. And you've got these phones that only allow you to have, headphones connected to it if they are Bluetooth. So then you have to get devices that you connect to that, and they'll go bad. Like they'll figure out that those devices exist and make it so that those devices are no longer compatible. You have to buy a new one. You end up just to use a hardwired headphone.
There really is this sort of deal with the devil thing in terms of convenience and, oh, we can do this. It would be so exciting to have this particular power. Am I willing to let it kill my body?
Yeah.
And people don't realize that that's a trade-off that they're making when they respond to the marketing pressures that everybody is surrounded by. And a lot of that too is coming through where there's like some sort of promotional thing about like a social care structure. Say, we'll help you by giving you this device, but not teaching you anything about how it could be harming you or your family.
Yeah.
And we find that really difficult to contend with, because people are scared and people want to accept solutions that are offered to them. And then we keep finding ourselves in positions to say, you know what, it's really important that you know that there are people who've been made really sick by using those, and that you don't know if that's going to be you or not.
Yeah, and I've known people that if they are, even close to a cell phone that's turned on, will feel burning.
Yes.
They're that sensitive. I don't happen to be, thank God, but a lot of people are.
I have to ask people in my vicinity to please turn off their devices, because I don't have Android devices here where we leave all the radios on. Mine is the only one. So I turn off everything that I'm not using. I just turn on one, like most of the time it's the Wi-Fi, but the 5G is off, the Bluetooth is off, the 2G is off, everything is off that I can turn off. But I have been frequently surrounded by Apple iPhones and iPad devices that not only is it really intensive radiation, like it's completely debilitating. Yeah. I stopped being able to communicate. I stopped being able to stand up. My digestion stops. I have life-threatening physiological episodes, like enrolling attacks for days or weeks afterward, depending on the exposure. The Apple devices, the Android devices don't seem to do this, and nothing on my computer, nothing on my PowerBook has done this, but the iPads and iPhones seem to, at least a lot of them, after a day, after you've turned off the radios, it turns them back on, and it doesn't tell you.
It doesn't matter. It will still emit, even if you have 5G shut off, even if you have it in airplane mode and you put an EMF meter near it, it's still emitting it.
Yes.
And it's basically
it's not totally
like your phone is like an airport. Your phone is like an airport. It's like sitting in an airport.
Yeah. And there are there are radios in most of these devices that it's not even possible to shut off. So, I mean, it's great that we can shut off the ones we can. And that's the only way I've been able to function well enough to do something like this. But still, there's a huge amount of electronic device hygiene. Like we are carrying guns around when we're carrying electronic internet connected devices around. And most people don't realize that until it's too late. And then they've got to figure out how to say to somebody, can you turn your devices off? It's really hurting me, and risk being made fun of, or risk being run out of an environment. Like, you're just a crazy person. We don't want to talk to you, because doubt has been seeded in scientific environments that, oh, those are just crazy people. Don't listen to them.
And it's not true. And you can, I challenge anybody to see the difference. There are these items called block bags. It's basically like a sleeping bag, but it's just like a sheet. It feels like a sheet. If you go and you are, laying down in bed inside of this thing, zipped up, you will feel different. Lay down without it, lay down with it, lay down without it again. Switch it on. You will feel calm when you lay down in it. You're going to feel like your entire system, like the nerve ends and everything, it calms you. Mm-hmm. And it's just silver threads in there. It's not anything like high tech or crazy. I mean, it's expensive to get them because like it's made of silver, right. But it's not all that cost prohibitive. And because because it's bedding and you use it all the time, it's not, it would be fine. But it does have that different feeling, and you will get a better night's sleep.
There are a lot of people working to create solutions like these out there, mm-hmm. and it can be really hard to find them. So the more we have accessible community spaces where we can have conversations like these without there suddenly being a conflict, like you just make no sense, we're not going to listen to you anymore. We can talk about it together, and then we find one another. And we find out about things we had no idea were there. I found countless things because of the intuitive network that if I had to do all that research only by myself, I never would have found.
It's so hard. And that's another thing, like about, within my space that, I hope that other people who are navigating this stuff in their spaces are letting people know, if somebody's coming at somebody like that, I doubt they would be in my space anyway. I mean, they're just not going to seek out my content if they're that sort of a person. But if they are, and they're in that space telling them how crazy they are for thinking that these things are real, well, we've done more research out of necessity than you've ever had to do. So don't pretend like when you haven't looked into it. You haven't, spent 10,000 hours on it trying to figure it out because you required it for your own health. Because you needed it to survive, you did that research. And that's what happens a lot of the time with a lot of different health issues. And that's how a lot of the people who had prior health issues knew what was going on with all of this beforehand. When all of this hit, they knew what to look for. They knew that it didn't sound right, that something was wrong. They had already had to go in the terrain route or the holistic route, or, different ways to solve a lot of their health issues, because allopathy was not cutting it. They were not getting anywhere with that. It was just keeping them, still sick and just barely alive and just barely functioning, which is the point. That's you're being turned into a medical annuity.
It makes a lot of people a lot of money. Mm-hmm. For people to be sort of endlessly sick, and wow, like we got to really watch out for that. But there's you just being in a space where we know that research has been going on, that there's that there's been this collective sharing of that research. There's like, I can afford to be especially calm if something comes up, because I'm like, there are other people here who know about this, and it's being published and broadcast about on the collective media part. The community body is reflected in the information that is shared about that. And that, like, the greater collective body then is increasingly stabilizing my ability to be steady and just sort of wait and be like, well, somebody said that, and that would have terrified me and been life-threatening to me before. But actually, I'm in a space where people talk about that and are respectful with one another and how they talk about that. And so I'm going to be like, I can kind of be peaceful about it. I don't have to feel, I mean, the way that complex PTSD can be,
Absolutely.
it can completely hammer you and take away your ability to evaluate the situation. But when we're connecting increasingly with collective bodies and media spaces that are prioritizing information that actually reflects the experiences of the community body, then we don't have to end up in those confusing conflicts that way.
No. And that's one of the things that I love about that space. No matter who it is, you can just say, I'm wondering this. I haven't found a lot of really great information or information that I trust. I can jump in here and just ask the question, and 10 people will probably write back to me and say, hey, yeah, I found this. So over the course of the day, you're going to get all of these different responses back of people as they check in. They'll see your question and they'll say, yeah, hey, I was looking into that and I found out X, Y, and Z. And then somebody will jump in. Well, I didn't like X because of this reason, but Y and Z are pretty good. And then somebody else jumps in, hey, I really liked Z, but I didn't like Y, and here's why.
Right.
And they'll go into that with you, and they'll help you narrow it down to figure out what's the best case scenario for overcoming whatever it is, or for implementing something, whatever it is. Doesn't matter, and we leave that open. It's not like you have to talk about any one specific thing in there and that's all you can talk about. We talk about everything. It doesn't matter. Whatever comes up, we don't care.
Everything.
Everything.
In really beautiful, creative, exploratory ways. There are things I want to bring up that there's no way we can talk long enough today for me to bring up all of this. So I mean, if we can do this again sometime, I am
absolutely
deeply
grateful. Of course.
Because there's such a body of work here that you have brought into the world, and of course you're working with a team also. I've only begun to learn a little bit more about how you do that, and maybe we can talk more about that in the future also.
Absolutely.
I would love to maybe wrap on asking you about what your plans forward are. What are you dreaming? Oh yeah, we're doing a simultaneous dream here. That I had a speech to text thing on Substack earlier where I was writing, and I wrote Simultistream, except it typed simultaneous dream with Demi Pietchell. Yes, exactly that. That's exactly our jam. How are you dreaming into the future with the Starfire codes?
I want to do another season of the podcast, and I want to start opening it up to do digital online readings, probably through YouTube and Rumble, and open that up in that way, and delve more into that, more writing, just more of the same of what I've been doing, but just a lot more of it, just branch out and keep going. And I like the way that things have been going. It's just, I'm seeing different opportunities for moving forward in different directions, and I want to take those and I want to run with them. So that's the next step.
We need what you are doing. We need
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for doing it. It is not easy to do what you are doing. It takes a huge amount of focus and dedication to do what you are doing. And thank you for being the role model in that way that you are. It makes a really big difference to us. And however we can support you going forward, that is a great interest of ours and of mine.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that it's helping. Like that's been, the main thing that people say to me, over the course of a day is just, if they let me know that something that I'm doing is helping, or, that's something that I'm putting out there changed their day for them, even, just made it better. Like that makes my day. That makes me happy. That makes me know that, that I'm making a difference, that what I'm doing is contributing to that it's, elevating everyone's frequency, but, providing resources for people, just even helping them to get out of bed laughing instead of being upset or being, you know, dreading their day, you know, just to have that, you know, I laughed at something and this made it better. And that means the world to me.
Yeah.
So anybody who comes to me and says that, like, you know, please, you know, like if I haven't, I try to be good about telling everyone that, but you know, if I haven't told you, that means the absolute world to me. And thank you.
The things we haven't much mentioned at all in this broadcast include amazing comedy spacescape that is occurring at the Starfire on Substack is glorious. The daily, like you have this daily like oracle deck that is created from your posts on a day-to-day basis for paid subscribers, and that's amazing. I hope people will go explore that, and we can talk about that more in the future because there's so much to talk about there. I guess we'll wrap here. I don't want to, but I will. Let's make sure we have your URLs on Substack, starfirecodes.com. I'll put it back up here. There we go. Starfirecodes.com. What other URLs would be helpful to call out? The Telegram is t.me/starfirecodes, right?
I've got everything in one spot. So if you go to starfirecodes.com, if you go to table of contents, there's a button in there for Linktree. You can find every single Starfire link that exists is in that Linktree. You'll be able to find it there. And then also we've got the different series are linked in there. So the articles are linked in there. They're separated out from the channel messages, from the scroll, which is a, you know, maybe bi-weekly thing that I do that, like, you know, has all the different conversations and things like that, different inspirations and things that a bunch of us have been talking about that I love putting forward. That's a new thing. And what I'm reading, what I'm watching, which I put out, you know, usually once a week. What I'm reading comes out every Sunday. And it's just a compilation of everything that I've been reading on Substack, and you know, wanted to make sure that people had a chance to see if they had missed it. And that's pretty much that. You know, so you can find all of those different things in there. If you want to book a reading with me, you can find that in there too. So that's through Buy Me a Coffee. Substack doesn't have infrastructure for shops or anything like that, so I did it with them, and I just linked back to it. And so there's, you know, ways in there to donate. There's ways in there to buy readings. There's ways in there to get discounts on readings. You'll see it all there.
Yes.
And yeah, that's basically that. Everything is in that table of contents.
To everybody who feels drawn to any of this, please support the Starfire Codes. We need a lot from the Starfire Codes, and we're getting so much from the Starfire Codes.
Thank you.
So I mean, I guess I did it again. I didn't think I could do that. I was like, I'm taking a leap of faith. I'm gonna have this conversation with Jacqueline Rendell, and then I like had to recover. I was like, how did I even, like, am I still here? Somehow I exist. And then I started promoting this for you and me, and I was like, this is crazy. Why? Because it's important. I have to do it because it's important.
Yeah. This has been great. This is wonderful.
Thank you for helping me.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. This is wonderful. It's been great talking to you, and especially, you know, about all of this. And I hope that, you know, anyone who needed to hear it did and will in the future. And, you know, reach out to us, you know, in either, on either platform. You'll find both of us, you know, you'll find us there.
Yes, we will keep being here doing this. Okay. Wow. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you, everyone who left comments. Thank you for putting comments here for me to put up on the screen. I wasn't able to catch all of them, but it gives me and us a lot of energy for you to do that. So I'm so grateful for people who come to the live stream. And we will be doing this again. I don't know what my recovery time will be exactly. But to everyone who's been here, you are wonderful, wonderful blessings. Demi, you are a wonderful, wonderful blessing.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this. Thank you. And I love you. And this is wonderful. Thank you so much.
So much gratitude. And we will be back someday soon.
Thank you.